Joining me now is former CIA Director John Brennan. So I just want to start with the fact that in this here, in the indictment, it outlines and summarizes 31 specific examples, but there are far more than that. We know from the numbers of what was pulled in by the FBI. How do you explain the discrepancy there?
Well, I think that according to the indictment, there were 120 classified documents that were obtained by the government as a result of that subpoena. So this is only 25% of that total number. And I do think the government was very careful as far as what it is that they're going to put out publicly. But
because some of them could be pulled back because the intelligence community wouldn't want them in the justice system or in the court process?
Yes, because it's going to be difficult to provide the type of documentary evidence that is necessary in order to prosecute this case. So I think the government gave an example in 31 documents, the broad sweep of the most highly classified, highly sensitive, and the most strategic intelligence related to our national security. Because those are the types of documents that go to a president. It's not things that are not really substantial at all. These are things that are most significant, most strategic to the defense of this country, as well as to our relationships with countries around the globe.
So you are a career intelligence officer. You've classified things. You've read a lot of classified documents at the highest level. As you looked at this summary, what stuck out to you the most? Was there any one specific document or a theme here?
Well, it's all the different types of subjects that are covered here, as you pointed out in the intro, in terms of nuclear capabilities, war plans, other types of things. But also, I can tell from the code words that are on there, not just the classification levels, but the code words, the types of very sensitive collection systems that this information is derived from, whether they be satellite or imagery or technical sensors that we have deployed around the world that provide us real insights in a covert manner about what our adversaries are doing and planning. So it's that exposure that just is very summary fashion in this indictment. But if these documents were accessed during their many, many months of being unsecured at Mar-a-Lago, if this was, in fact, a target of foreign intelligence services, and I would think that it was going to be a very easy target for sophisticated intelligence adversaries around the globe to go in there, make copies of these documents. And that's why I think the intelligence community right now is really challenged to try to determine what might have been compromised, because this clearly was not 24/7 video coverage of these documents throughout this period of time. So they're going back and they're checking to see which human sources in particular might have been compromised because their lives are on the line. Which of these technical collection systems?
And human sources are people we may have worked with for decades that are on the ground in challenging countries we get imperative information from.
Absolutely. One of the code words on there is HCS, which is the Human Control System, which means that there was information that was provided from these human sources around the globe who put their lives at risk to provide us information. That is the type of information that goes into the documents that are provided to the president. And the fact that this was left so unsecured for so long, I know that my former colleagues in the intelligence community are shuddering, because looking at this indictment, I'm sure many of them for the first time saw in very stark language exactly what was in Mar-a-Lago for so long. These are professionals who are obligated to keep very tight control over these documents. And then for Trump to be able to treat them in so cavalier and careless and reckless fashion, it just undermines the very foundation upon which the whole national security apparatus is founded.
Now, we don't know this yet, and obviously it will be litigated through the legal process. But knowing what you know about these type of documents and the themes in here, what do you ascribe the motive here for Trump? Why did he want to hold on to these things?
Oh, it's a big, big question. Clearly, he felt as though he owned all of this stuff. And so what he was going to do with it afterward, whether it was going to impress people, as I think we've seen in things that have come out, including in the indictment, that he was making reference to these classified documents and secret information, whether he was trying to do that to curry favor with individuals here in the States or overseas, who knows? But again, I think the violation here clearly is the unlawful detention, handling, movement of these documents, almost irrespective of what that motive was.
One of the classifications on there is Five Eyes, right, which pertains to intelligence shared with some of our key intelligence partners. How, if it were you, if you were still in the government, you would be having some awkward conversations right now, presumably, about what intelligence is out there. How do our partners consume this? How do those conversations go when the intelligence of another country may have been compromised?
Well, unfortunately, I had to have several of those awkward conversations with my counterparts of Five Eyes countries while I was director of the CIA. And it was a result of unauthorized disclosures. Maybe it was a document or two documents or something that was out there, or somebody who decided to ignore their security obligations that shared these documents. But never, ever has there ever been somebody in such status and standing as a former president of the United States who was actually responsible for that. So now I'm really concerned that our closest partners, the Five Eyes, really are wondering just how shaky our system is if a president of the United States treats their information, and we rely heavily on their sources, their technical, their human sources. And so when they see that it is left this way, in an unsecure fashion, it really, I think, is going to give them some pause as far as continuing to provide the extent and the depth of the information that they have to date.
Before I let you go, there's been some speculation that the map that former President Trump was showing in 2021, in August of 2021 or September, may have been about Afghanistan. Is there anything about any of the timelines of these documents that gave you pause because you knew what the moment was?
Well, there were several of those things that I think I know what it might relate to, but I'm not going to provide any more insight into it than is what is in that indictment. But it is clear that I've been able to put some pieces together, and I'm sure our adversaries and others have been able to put the pieces together, even if they didn't see it, which is why it's so outrageous that so many members of Congress and presidential candidates continue to make excuses for Donald Trump. It's just outrageous.